Hello Rebrand gang, and welcome to episode 30 of Rebrand Everything. Today we are going to be redesigning the Crayola logo. Big thanks to Mason for submitting this idea over on rebrandeverything.com. Let's go. So even though Crayola is probably one of the most widest known brands ever, I couldn't actually think of the logo until I saw it again. On the website they use this logo with this kind of smiley face shape underneath with a rainbow gradient inside. At first I did think it was a little bit over the top to have like a big rainbow gradient right through it, but then when I saw the packaging it all made sense. On the packaging they have this part of the logo cut out so that you can see the colours inside. So on the website they have a gradient inside there just to kind of indicate that. I did wonder a little bit if the logo on the website actually needed the gradient, as the background and everywhere that it appears is already super bright and colourful anyway. But then I also did think that I'm not really the target market, and that extra colour probably does make it a lot more exciting to look at for kids. The word mark's okay, it looks like an okay kind of friendly-ish font, and then you have this sort of overload of effects on there. We've got a bevel, a green stroke around it, a gradient within the text, and then this larger yellow stroke which then sits on top of another yellow background, so that just seems a little bit overboard for me. They do use this much more simplified logo on the actual crayon itself, on that paper wrap where it has to be reproduced in single colour. They have a much more simple version and it kind of looks like an old logo that's been put on there. So something else to think about is that the Crayola brand has something like a 98% recognition rate. So I think it's going to be pretty dangerous to go changing the colours from the green and yellow that they've used for so many years in the past. So there's quite a lot to think about on this project, so let's get to sketching out some ideas. So at the sketching stage I was just thinking up lots of different ideas as usual, but bearing in mind that I needed to think about that cutout on the packaging, that was like another little aspect of it that I needed to think about. I needed to work out what parts of that would cut out and show through, and then I also needed to think how that would translate into a logo on the website. So what would you put in the panels that would be cut out on the packaging, if that makes sense. So I wanted to streamline the logo but not too much so it got corporate and cold. I wanted to keep it friendly because the target market is kind of like 2 to 10 year olds, but I know the parents will be the ones buying it, but I still wanted to keep it kind of like fun, so when the kid sees it it's kind of exciting. What I really didn't want to do is make it look like a packaging for something else, some sort of coffee or something like that a kid just wouldn't be interested in. A few of the ideas involved either using like a crayon stroke or actually using a crayon as one of the letters inside the logo. Because they don't just sell crayons, I didn't want to just kind of like make it look like they only sold one product, because this logo appears on lots of different things. If you look on the products on their website they've got loads of different things now. But then at the same time, because their like heritage and their history is all about crayons, I thought you might get away with using that in there, and it's just because that's like their original or most well-known product. Just a quick one, don't forget to press like if you're enjoying this video, it really helps the channel out. Also, if you've got Instagram, follow me at Rebrand Everything. I post stories, logos, Illustrator, design tips, stuff like that, and pretty much anything else that comes into my head. Let's get on with the video. So my goal for option 1 was to create a logo that would slot nicely into their current branding. I found out the font that they were using on their website, and it was called Omnes or Oms. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, and I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, but it was OMNES. I managed to find a vector version of their current logo, which was good because then I could just use the eyedropper tool on that and use it kind of like as my colour palette for when designing my new ones. So once I had my word mark all sorted out, I wanted to add another element which would be used to hold the gradient or a little bit of colour into the logo, and would also be used as the cutout on the packaging to show the crayons through. So when I was creating the bar, I actually took the L from the font, I outlined that, turned it on its side, and what that just gave me was them little rounded corners, so it has that same kind of characteristics as the font, so it fits in rather than just looking like a random bar that I've added after. I tried adding the gradient inside from the old logo, but it looked a little bit too much like Microsoft Word art, which is just that look that I just really hate. So I thought to get around that I would use 8 equal boxes and kind of put a gradient in there running through the boxes, but split into separate boxes rather than just that smooth gradient look, which is just a bit ugly. And to give it a little bit more depth and a little bit more interest, I added some subtle shadows into each of them boxes, and I thought that kind of indicates or replicates the kind of real life shadows you get from the crayons being set back a little bit inside the actual packaging. So in the research phase, I saw some old Crayola logos, and it sparked the idea of creating like a new version of like the old classic. I then refreshed my memory of what the other elements were around the logo on that old version. I started out by getting Futura Extra Bold, which is that old font that they used. Then I outlined that and then rounded the edges just so it looked a little bit more child friendly. And then I saw that swoop that they've got underneath that kind of arcs down. And it also actually has that bars inside, like the bars of colour instead of just a smooth gradient, which is quite interesting. I wanted to incorporate something like this swoop, but something that's a little bit more positive and a little bit more energetic looking, rather than that sort of like downward arching, sort of like frowny smile. It's just wasn't looking so positive to me. So to make something more positive and interesting, I got the pen tool and played around with a few different arches, just making it turn back into that smile, which is kind of a nod to their current logo, and also just generally a little bit of a more positive shape. After playing around with a few different shapes and trying a few different things, I ended up just using this symmetrical shape as it seemed to work well under the text. And it also looked like a smiling mouth, like I just mentioned a minute ago. And then when I used a different stroke profile on the ends, it actually looked a little bit like a crayon in each end, but I didn't want to go too hard on that. I just thought that was like a little added bonus. Once I add the coloured bars into that, I thought it looked a little bit weak, and I kind of imagined it being cut out of the packaging and just like, it just looked so dark in there because there's no light coming in and it's just going to be too small. So I doubled the thickness of the stroke and like went through the process again to put the coloured bars in, and I thought that looked a lot stronger and would look a lot better as the cutout on the packaging.
3.
For option 3, I wanted to try something a little bit different by including a rainbow gradient in a shape, but instead of doing that linear gradient that makes it look like word art or just makes it look quite basic, I wanted to do something where you have that free flowing gradient. I don't know the exact name for it, but kind of like how Instagram use the colours. You know, that gradient where you put the points in and it just kind of blends all the colours together. I'm just going to find out what that's called because it's bugging me. It is called... Oh, it's not even telling me. What is it called? I'll Google it if I have to. Oh my god. Freeform gradient. It's called freeform gradient. And for this option, I had another vision in my head that I wanted to bring to life in this option. And that was to have like the word Crayola in the middle and then a cutout on top and a cutout underneath, which I thought would frame it and really make the logo stand out well. So it seemed like putting a circle behind, being split up with a rectangle with the word mark inside would work well, and it would be a good way of achieving these ideas that I had all within this one option. The font that I ended up using for this one was called Multicolor, and I use that because it has them nice rounded ends, so it kind of looks a little bit playful and a little bit friendly, but it's still creative and it's not too corporate and cold.
4.
So for option 4, I wanted to create a version where I don't have to worry about having the logo be part of the cutout on the packaging. I thought that I could just use a cool shape somewhere further down the packaging and not make it integrate with the logo. So it kind of cut that restriction out of my head. So with this in mind, I wanted to create something cool that incorporated some sort of creative icon that's kind of like a reference to crayons, as that is the main thing that they're sort of historically known for. So once I've made this cool little crayon icon, I thought, oh yeah, it's looking all right. And I thought that I'll give it some shading to give it a little bit of depth. I was super conscious to keep it not looking like an illustration. I wanted to keep it simple like an icon, so that if it was used, for example, on the actual paper wrap around the crayon, just in single colour, it would still be clear, even though you can't reproduce the extra shading and everything. So I used the crayon in place of the L, and then off of that I made it look like that was drawing an oval around the whole icon, and then I put a brush stroke on that, which I know is a little bit cheesy. I thought it kind of tied in with the current logo that they're using. It kind of made me cringe a little bit because I thought, God, this is proper cheesy and it's kind of awful. But then at the same time, I did think that I am not the target audience, and it kind of does illustrate exactly probably what they want to illustrate anyway. So I thought it's probably strong enough to put in as an option.
5.
So at the sketching stage, I did have this idea of using the actual logo letters as the cutout, which means having no holes inside the letters, of course, because they would just fall out as soon as they're cut. So with this in mind, I wanted to try it. And I remembered this font that I normally just scroll straight past, and it's called LOT, which is just capital L-O-T. So once I'd typed it out, I thought it needed a little bit of adjustment just to make it look a little bit better, a little bit clearer. So I outlined all of that and then rounded off most of the corners just to make it a little bit more friendly looking, a little bit more child friendly, a little bit less sort of aggressive looking. And I adjusted some of the letters just to make them a little bit clearer. And I had something then that looked quite ugly, but I thought maybe it's ugly iconic, I'm not sure. And I just did want to proceed with this idea because I thought it could be quite cool on the actual packaging. The only thing I was thinking, when the text was like this, I didn't have a way of showing the brand colour when it was used as a cutout on the pack, so I wanted to add some sort of holding element around it. I had a look at using strokes, but it all looked a little bit wiggly and ugly, so I ended up with this panel behind of the green. and I thought that looked quite good on the background of the yellow. I thought it maintains that green we've got our cutouts. There was one thing that I was worried about, and that's that the letters weren't going to be big enough to see the product through the actual holes, as the holes from the letters are probably going to be quite small once that's on there. You're probably not really going to see through, so that might be one negative point of this idea. But what I'm going to do is make a mock-up of all of these final options, and that is a good way of finding out whether it's going to work or not. So when I'm doing Photoshop work like this, I always like to use masks and smart objects so that it's really easy for me to update the artwork for each one. I just duplicate the file, update that smart object, and then update the mask as well to cut out the bits that I want. And this saves me a hell of a lot of time rather than creating everything from scratch each time. Before I show you them final options, I just wanted to remind you to press that little I button up here and vote for your favourite options, then go straight down to the comments and let me know why that was your favourite and what you would have done. If you want to see videos like this every single week, please press subscribe, and if you want to get a notification every time I upload, press the little bell button as well. Press like on this video, it will really help the channel out, and here are the final options.